and the expanding population will require houses and roads. The net effect on the risk of water quality impairment of such trends is uncertain. Right? It's uncertain. He talked about U.S. population growth continuing to rise, but the author also says that the net effect on the risk of water quality impairment is uncertain. So despite the fact that there is a recognition of the correlation, there's definitely a legitimized recognition of the correlation between human populations, this is what this author is saying, human population increase and water quality decrease, and then obviously water volume decrease. We know that water volume is going to decrease for sure. But the relationship between human population increase and water quality decrease hasn't been as firmly sort of empirically verified yet. That's what this author is saying. The net effect on the risk of water quality impairment of such trends is uncertain, which suggests that continued vigilance and environmental protection may be needed to avoid further deterioration. Right? So I mean, this makes sense. So if we were doing, and this is, I guess, becoming sort of simultaneous, not only a logic lecture, but my first sort of environmental lecture. I didn't expect this to become this, but this is the nature of the game. The idea is so that you can see this, we assumed a hypothetical syllogism. We made the claim that there is a relationship on page 15, there's a relationship between population growth and increased water pollution. Right. This was selected arbitrarily. Right? This was selected arbitrarily. This C is on page 15. Right, this is on page 15, line 2. Page 15, line number 2, we arbitrarily selected the idea of sort of water contamination. And then we were able to come to the conclusion, derive the conclusion that, well, it seems that groundwater pumping, not in and of itself, there's no obvious direct correlation between pumping water out the ground and the water becoming contaminated. But the idea is that groundwater pumping fuels population expansion. Population expansion could potentially result in the pollution of the water supply. Thus, groundwater pumping could lead to this is not the greatest argument in the world, but you get the idea, right? Groundwater pumping could lead to its own contamination, right? So I like the idea in that regard, because the connection seems like the link is not clear at all. But when you think about it, no. Well, if I'm using increased groundwater pumping to maintain a larger population, and there is a connection between a larger population and decreased water quality, then there is obviously an association between increasing groundwater pumping and decreasing the quality of the water that's in the ground. Right? And we'll see a consequence of a final implication, because I think the final implication is pretty serious, right? Conceptually speaking and environmentally speaking, right? It's pretty serious. And that's the point, right? Not only is it a lecture so that you understand the application and appropriation of rules of inference to the construction of argument, rhetoric, concepts, mind, the way that you think and such, but it's important that we recognize that this can be applied, you know, to stuff that people care about, like the environment. It's something that I care about, so that's what I want to do here. All right. So example number 2 now. What we're going to do is we're going to embed the original claim, right? Example number 1 in black, and the new augmented claims in red. I'm going to skip the black and just jump right to the red. So we're in the middle of page 16 now, and here's the first bracket. Since the research wasn't clear, remember I had 2 citations. One citation that definitely made the association between increased population growth, and I'll just put this so that you don't forget, and this will be pop growth, and this will be decreased water quality. Right? So B is population growth, C is decreased water quality, and then A, just so that we completed, is increased water pumping. I don't need to sort of write everything out because we're sort of deep into the lecture. I mean, 2 hours into the lecture. So there's no need to really write any words out. We can just look at the logic and assign values to each of these, right? So increased water pumping results in population growth, or stabilizes, supports population growth. Population growth may lead to decreased water quality, therefore increased pumping may lead to decreased water quality. So since, in the middle of page 16, since the research wasn't clear about the facts of this connection, it would be academically dishonest, because I had one person that really established this connection and one person that said this connection is there is a correlation, but the strength of it is it's too complex to just make this direct. But that's good. That's great. I think what we're doing at this point, despite the fact that this argument is, it seems like this argument is a little spacey, it's starting to arrive at some interesting findings, right? And I'm not trying to arrive at interesting findings. The intent of my lecture series now is not about the environment per se. I just picked that randomly. But now I'm like, well, you know, it seems like, and the publication was from 2012. You can look at the citation below, right? The citation is from 2012. So I'm like, wow, isn't that cool? Sort of intuitively, I find myself completely arbitrarily doing this lecture series on logic, and I arrive at something which which researchers in field this year are trying to establish the exact same connection that I sort of felt like that they're doing it right now. That's cool. That's just cool. So, since the research wasn't clear about the facts of this connection, it would be academically dishonest to present select findings without also addressing competing facts, beliefs, right? So we were just, in the presentation of information, we had authors that said this connection is very strong, and we have authors that said the connection is there, but it isn't, the strength of the connection or the correlation isn't known. So there is, now we're back to the actual sentence, right? So there is contemporary debate, however, about the direct nature of this relationship. That's my wording, right? There's contemporary debate, however, about the direct nature of this relationship. Rabia Ahmed affirms a more direct connection between population growth and water contamination. Okay? So the idea is, now that's just your own style, stylistically how you want to write. But what I want to say is, here's the hypothetical syllogism. Boom, boom, if A then B, if B then C, therefore if A then C. Right after that, I then say, there is contemporary debate, however, about the direct nature of this relationship. This person affirms a more direct connection between population growth and water contamination. Insert citation. The insertion of the citation supports line 2 of HS. I'll say that again. The insertion, so here's HS. HS 1, 2, 3 concludes here. I then put the passage that says, listen, I was able to find 2 competing claims. That goes after HS. You already know what we're going to do with that, right? Extract for what's next. So that goes after HS. And it affirms line 2 as something of interest. And it is of interest because in 2012, you know, physical scientists, completely unbeknownst to me without logic had me find it, that physical scientists this year are trying to establish a stronger connection. Or not. They're trying to see what the truth is. So recently, however, Brown and this other person addressed the difficulties in asserting such a direct connection, speaking to the complex nature of legitimizing the direct correlation between population growth on the one hand and water pollution on the other. That is just me writing. Conceptually, however, I want to, and more generally, so it's not specific to this, I recognize that line B, as I said before, the connection is going to be an arbitrary connection because I, as the author, am going to select what my consequence is going to be. This consequence could have been anything, right? I selected arbitrarily my consequence. I chose, for whatever purposes, water pollution. Insofar as I choose water pollution, I need to legitimize that connection. I find information in the research that affirms or denies that connection. If you go into the research and you see that people have denied habitually your correlation, don't stress it. You know, this correlation may follow logically, or there might be some connection, but there isn't yet enough research to legitimize the claim. If you find tons of research that support it, disconnection